Welcome to Mythcon with your hosts, Brian, Dimitri, and Sean, off camera. We have a packed house today because we're interviewing the one and only Rucka Rucka Ali. Rucka's a famous internet personality, YouTube rapper, and satirist who mixes comedy with political and social commentary in his music, and now perhaps we can say, aspiring philosopher. After his fabulous performance on the Rubin Report in 2017, Rucka, it's a pleasure to make Sean's personal man crush fantasy come true.
That's right.
Welcome, brother.
Well, that's 100%. And I just want to do something for people at home. Alexa, play Rucka Rucka Ali Volume 10. Good luck getting that thing to shut up. I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with Alexa when she's on Volume 10 because she can't fucking hear you. And I'm just screaming at her. So have fun with that. Yeah, have fun with that.
We just had a whole Jesus. We had like 8 hours of your material the other night.
Hey, I'm working on my Type 5 for the Comedy Store. I know you have no idea what that means, but Rucka, thanks for the Comedy Store. Thanks for joining us, Rucka.
Yeah, great to be here. By the way, I'm trying to tweet out the link to this. That's why I'm looking at my phone. It's not like I don't respect your show and I'm just sitting here texting. There's some shit. But it's like I've never had such a hard time copying a link and posting it. Here, I think I got this. Okay, here we go.
Should be Myth-informed.
All right.
Yeah,
is that the name of the show?
Yeah, that's the name of the show.
And it will be the name of the organization at some point.
At some point when we get around to it. Yeah.
It's when we get around to renaming and changing all the shit around.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, dude, we have 5,000 different things to talk about in, I don't know, an hour more. You know, we don't really have time restraints. You are truly a fascinating guy. I mean, from your music to your recent videos, opening up about politics, life philosophy, damn son. And by the way, as a quick disclaimer, if anyone out there hasn't listened to Rucka's music, do yourself a favor, do it immediately. Before we get deep into the shit, talking about life, philosophies, ethics, whatever, let's make a quick announcement. Brian.
What, the big news?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm pregnant?
Jesus.
Hey, some men have uteruses. They do. I saw it on Twitter. So okay, but I'm not actually pregnant, but I may or may not have a uterus. But anyway, the big announcement is Kilroy. We're going to be there. I don't know if it's a big announcement. It's up on the website.
No. We're not the attraction.
We are not the attraction.
Right. That's for sure.
We're going to shamelessly promote ourselves.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But Rucka, you're going to be there. That's kind of cool. And are you excited to go to Kilroy? It sounds like a lot of people are going to be there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. It's definitely going to be cool. And I'm looking forward to being on stage. I'm trying to learn how to speak better, as you can probably tell by my tone right now. I'm trying not to say, like, actually, I'm doing like the Toastmasters thing. I'm really trying to get better at communication. So, see, I just said, I should say fuck. But like, in addition to it being a good cause, which is obviously near and dear to my heart, it's also a great chance to have a stage and talk to an audience. How crazy is that?
Yeah, is that your first time being live somewhere? I mean, I'm not talking like Dave Rubin or whatever. I mean, like in front of a crowd.
I've definitely performed music a lot on stage and like kind of riffed. Like I've been on stage kind of, shooting the shit, like kind of podcast type shit on stage, but to be up there talking about ideas,
yeah,
I definitely know what, like, I have enough shit to say, but as far as being an effective speaker, as far as not stuttering and going and all that shit, that's what kind of is a little nerve-wracking.
Yeah. And are you hosting the events? Is that what you're doing?
No, I'm moderating, I think, a couple of panels.
Excellent. And
I am going to have my very own slot of time, which I'm planning to use. If there's a guy named Charles Tew, Tew, who I watch on YouTube, and I'm hoping he makes it out there, in which case I'll sort of interview him / talk with him for that slot up for that hour. If he's not there, I might be up there alone, or I might find someone else to talk to. But I am planning to spend an hour of the convention talking about where free speech intersects with property rights. I think that's an important thing to cover.
That's excellent. And so one of the things with Kilroy is it came under fire a little bit. And, with us organizing Mythcon, we kind of understand, you know. I mean, this is a huge task, and people get into this, they don't understand just how big of a task it is. And Base Mama and her team like really had some early issues and problems with it. And you know, we've been there, we've done that. The thing with Kilroy is like when we first started Mythcon, it was like maybe 100 people showing up, and we could have made a ton of mistakes, and you know, a ton of
in a hotel room.
Yeah, in a hotel room, people forgave us, you know, because it was like whatever, you know, like this, at least it's happening type of thing. But so we made all of our early mistakes while we were small until, you know, now some people actually know who we are. Now we kind of have the foundations there, and I think that's what happened with Kilroy is they just were like bam right in the spotlight immediately, and it's tough going, you know, making those mistakes, getting some bad advice, and you know, like I say, I don't like listening to what other people tell me what, you know, to do. I'm gonna show up, and I wish them the best of luck. You know, we want to see these conferences thrive, and we want to see more opportunities for people like you to be on stage talking about what you're passionate about. So
yeah, I like that last part. I agree with that. Yeah, no, I mean, I didn't really pay much attention to the controversy. It seemed like misunderstandings and miscommunication and the people being volatile kind of all turning into a giant tornado. So I don't think anyone was ever dishonest. I don't think anyone ever scammed anyone. There was just a lot of poor communication all around, and a lot of people going public with their opinion and stuff like that. So I don't know. Communication is an important part of this type of thing, and communicating with the public is a big part of it. So yeah, I don't know. But again, like I didn't really pay close attention to it. To me, it's just like if it's happening, I'm there. If it's not happening, I'm not there. If I'm going to have fun, you know, and let's move on with our life.
Well, the internet is breaking down like all barriers to communication, period. Right? I mean, I can get a hold of a guy in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan like in an instant. Before, you couldn't do that. One person commented on Twitter, it was hilarious. It said the internet allowed you a look into how people think, and that has been most unfortunate. That you know what your friends think about politics. You know that you know everything about everybody because they're so connected. And you're like, oh wow, my good friend thinks this, and now we're seeing people defriending each other, like the political divisions between friends, breaking up families a little bit. That is
yeah, but I think it diffuses situations too. You know, I was at a party Saturday, and I know someone who posts a lot of like leftist things, and so I had some interesting things to talk to her about. Like I already knew her positions, so I didn't have to come in, feel around, stumble into a wall, and go, oh fuck, you know, we totally disagree or whatever. You know, we disagree on things. You know, she knew where I stood, I knew where she stood, and we kind of just tiptoed around certain topics.
Right, but you knew not to go in with MAGA, baby.
I mean, I wouldn't, period, unless I was trying to troll her, and that wouldn't get anywhere, you know.
What do you think, Rucka? I mean, is the internet the new place of communication?
Yeah, of course it is, and I think it's a net good. If people are not getting along because of things posted on Facebook, I think that really says more about people being out of touch with a healthy way of living and a healthy way of looking at each other. People focus entirely too much on politics, in my opinion, which I kind of say with mixed feelings because I do realize how important these things are, but it's a net good. There's just no way around that. Just the opportunity for us to have this conversation, for us all to entertain the world, for us all to communicate with people. I mean, just go back a decade. You know, you meet somebody, you have to get their phone number and call them and hope they're home when you call, or leave them a voicemail. Or wait, no, we had cell phones 10 years ago. Okay, I'm just saying, like back in the day. But
hey, you were a rich kid. I didn't have a cell phone.
Yeah, I was not that rich, but yeah, I had a cell phone 10 years ago. It was my only phone. I was 21. Yeah, so I had a phone. But yeah, I mean, communication is a good thing, and yeah, it's good.
Just having problems know how to do with it, where we know too much, and we have to get a little more realistic. That my friends a lot of times are going to think differently than me. That's okay. That I can be friends with somebody who's opposite politically, that thinks wildly different things on a bunch of different subjects. I don't understand why we have to be homogeneous. That's the problem. I think people don't know what to do with the internet. right?
Yeah, but
Well,
the root is morality, and I think we're gonna touch on that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, later on in the what that's like the deep shit.
Yeah, but I think it's evolving too,
Mhm.
and I think before we
Get
get,
better at it.
yeah, you know, I mean, you see like what happened in Egypt with the revolution and how that was all put together by Facebook, and you know, I mean, so there are really good things that come out of
Supposedly.
it. And no, I was there. It was, but yeah, no, it's just crazy. It's just evolving, and you know, we just gotta you know figure it out. But before we get into the deep philosophical stuff, we got Rucka Rucka on the show, and I wanted to talk about comedy and PC culture. And I know you know you've been under fire in the past for some of this. I'm personally a fan and an advocate of comedy being able to transcend, you know, a lot of the social political taboos that we see. And you know, you've done that with your work, and you know, you continue to make new videos and new music that really kind of pushes the limit. And you know, when I think about what you do, I think about what Dave Chappelle did. I think about what South Park has done. I think about what you know a lot of these comedians and people that have kind of challenged the norm and extended these conversations that we should be having. Have you noticed, especially you being in LA and Hollywood, have you noticed that comedy's being, you know, affected by more of the social justice expectations?
Well, stand-up comedy is definitely dead. I don't mean it's dead. Like, it's still a thriving industry, but every time I go to a show, it's like these people get up there and there's like one point of view. Like the girls, the girl comedians all just talk about how lonely and you know how past their prime they are. Like, oh, I'm 32 now. Yeah, I miss being 25, and I have no boyfriend. Like, there's that. And you know, there's usually intertwined with some resentful feminist type, you know, wage gap stuff. And then the guys are typically, they get up there and they talk about Trump being Hitler, or I don't know. It's like there's like the same stuff over and over again. Well, okay. And like here's one thing. Okay, like if say a black comic gets up and talks about when are white people allowed to say the N-word, and he'll have like a whole 10-minute routine
Marlon
on
Wayans
when it's Chris Rock, a lot of them, when it's okay to say the N-word, and it can be very funny stuff. But he's basically talking about like what's socially acceptable, what's going to get you in trouble, and the context of that. He's on stage in front of people that are out for a night of fun, and so it's hospitality in addition to being comedy. It's entertainment, like live entertainment. And he's talking about when it's okay for white people to say the N-word, and people in the audience are like cackling, like, oh wow, he went there.
Yeah.
If you post that same routine on the internet, what's the first comment that someone's going to write?
Exactly.
So it's like in the internet, like we skip past all the formality and all the social conventions. We just get right to the point. Like, let's just go there. And that's something I've enjoyed very much. And there's something kind of more honest about it. I don't mean honest in the way that like you can be your true ugly self. I mean, it's more honest. Like you get to skip past these rules that people kind of have in polite company that are sometimes kind of arbitrary, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it makes sense. And you know, it's funny. Like what I was thinking. What if White Chicks? You guys remember the movie White Chicks with Marlon John?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what if that would have been
blackface?
What if that was a YouTube? No. What if it was a YouTube series today? I mean, Jesus Christ, that would just be insane. Just think about like how crazy that would be.
What do you mean?
Like, instead of that coming out in what was that, like the mid 2000s or whatever?
Yeah.
What if it was posted on YouTube as like a movie?
It'd be
with
just
these two
as
actors.
Popular today because
I don't know. I don't know if it would.
Yeah,
I really don't know.
Because remember, black people can't be racist. It's not possible.
Well, I don't.
Racism is a power dynamic.
Obviously,
of blah,
that's not true.
You know,
but
blah blah blah.
It would be interesting in today's world, like how.
So what you mean is that like people like antisocial justice types would call hypocrisy on it if it came out today? Is that what you're getting at?
Yes. I mean, it would just be interesting to see how the different sides would view it. You know, that's
the best example that always comes to mind when we talk about how times have changed is that in 2014 or even 15, Dear White People was a movie on Netflix, and the trailer came out on YouTube, and I'm sure there were some people saying like, oh, that's not cool. What if I say Dear Black People? That wouldn't be cool. But by and large, no one really gave a shit. A couple years later, the show comes out on Netflix, and it's fucking anti-SJW fucking field day. It's fucking open season on that movie. So it's the same title for the show and the movie, but kind of like the reaction to the culture of political correctness had gone to the point where everyone's calling out everything.
I don't think it was insane. It's not as insane in 2015. Like
No.
But in 2017, 2018, like, yeah, the anti-SJW side is pissed because it's really ramped up on the other side.
I find it interesting. You talked about the death of stand-up, and maybe I just don't notice because I watch the same tired, HBO specials.
You watch stand-up from the
time.
90s still.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? Stand-up is not dead. There it is. But that's true. You don't see and Russell Peters is a bad example because he gets a pass because he's a minority. Okay, cool. But like a Bill Burr, so he, I don't think has as big of a following because people will yell misogynist and white supremacist and all that shit to him. And that guy kind of doesn't really have any limits.
Well,
There's not a lot of white comics that will go.
Bill Burr's one of the biggest comics there is, right? I mean, if you're going to look at comics today, you have Bill Burr, you have...
I don't think... I wouldn't put Bill Burr in
Joe
like
Rogan.
the top 5 of like the, oh my God, this is one of the most influential comics. You're probably gonna put like a Dave Chappelle up there, or
Dave Chappelle's comeback,
or like
now,
a Louis
right.
C.K. But then now Louis C.K. is a whatever, and so they killed his career. I mean, there's a lot less edgelord comedy now than there was before. So it's retreated to YouTube, and that's why we've got Rucka, people like you who just throw out ridiculous videos and make us laugh.
Yeah.
And watching that and laughing at it doesn't make you racist. Shouldn't even make you cringe. Just be like, okay,
yeah,
I agree with that last part. But you know what I think when stand-up comedy started to die might have been with that Michael Richards outburst.
Rich.
So Kramer from Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah. I thought that's who you meant. Okay.
Yeah. So for those not aware, for those out of touch, for those under 25.
Right.
Michael Richards, who played Kramer on Seinfeld, was caught on camera with somebody's phone, presumably, in the year 2007, I believe, yelling the N-word a lot at an audience member in a lot of anger. He said 50 years ago, we'd have you hanging upside down with a fork up your ass. He was very upset at some black folks in the audience that I guess either he says were heckling him or he just lost his temper for whatever reason. And this was kind of the birth of people catching stuff on camera.
Yeah.
Recordings of people saying racist stuff. There've been a handful of those since then, but that might have been one of the first times. And also for a stand-up comic to get in serious trouble.
Yeah.
That might have been when comedians started really taking into consideration, like, how is this going to affect my career? Because as late as that very decade, the mid 2000s, I used to watch Comedy Central a lot. You had that Colin Quinn show, Tough Crowd, where he would have Patrice O'Neill and Nick DiPaolo, like yelling at each other. Why don't white people just apologize? Oh, fuck you. You blacks are never satisfied. Like, there was just, everyone was just kind of like open about everything. And like, it was fun. And Louis C.K. was also, I think pretty big at that time. So like, there was a lot of that going on, and I think that might have been around the time that comedy started to be like more of a dangerous place to tread. But in addition to that, it's also that the culture is changing to the point where comedians are themselves social justice types, even if they don't know it, even if they don't call themselves that. But they do tend to believe in different groups oppressing one another. They do believe in intersectionality, many of them. With the surge of female comedians, some of them are very funny. Maybe all of them are, maybe most of them are very funny, but a lot of them really do have a chip on their shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And just academically, virtually all these people have gone to college or they've been influenced by people that have studied in college who believe in these things. They believe in intersectionality. They believe that there's a system in place that's oppressing someone and everyone's guilty of something and oppressed by someone. So in a very sad way, it's not so much that comedians are afraid to speak up. In many, many, many cases, they have nothing edgy to say anymore because they genuinely don't want to offend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that might be a gap that's going to be filled.
Well,
you know, if everyone is boring as fuck, you know, so a new Dennis Leary is going to
Yeah.
show up on the scene,
Yeah.
and he's going to be
well,
fresh.
I think you will start to see the pendulum swing back. And I know you're you know, Rucka, you're in LA, you're probably hit up a lot of nightclubs and stuff. But you know, we had Jill Michelle Melly on the show, and she's a former cast member of Mad TV, and she was actually, you know, defending Louis in the sense of, you know, like she didn't feel it was right what happened to him. And you know, and I don't know if you guys
he also
seen,
didn't do anything illegal.
that's
Like that's
no,
that's
it's
the
true.
other thing.
Well, it's
What the
true,
fuck?
but you know, for her to come out and support, I mean, that would, you know, especially at the time when
Yeah,
everyone was going after him. So I think there are some people that are kind of seeing kind of the overreach with some of that. And like, I don't know if you guys caught Dimitri Martin's last special, but like he went hardcore. Like, check it out if you haven't seen it. Like, Dimitri Martin's typically more of the you know, pencil and pad and, you know, piano and like really fluffy stuff. And like this last special, he was, you know, he was on race, he was on politics, he went hardcore. So I don't know. I hope we see the pendulum swing back to where it's that, you know, you're free to do whatever you want on stage, you know.
So on Louis C.K., of all the Me Too stories that came out, that his was, I felt, kind of strange. Like he masturbated in front of two women in a hotel room. Like that's
who cares?
I almost don't even want to go near it, but like it's weird. Like were they being forced to watch? It's like, would they have ever brought it up if all the other women weren't outing everyone?
You know, so they
no. See, they were not groupies. They were comedians.
Okay.
They were also comedians.
Yeah, they were aspiring comedians. He was their hero, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
okay.
no, they were aspiring comedians. And the thing is, like, if it's your boss, the director of your company, the president of your company says, hey, Dimitri, I'm going to help you out and give you a raise. You can just watch me masturbate in this plant real quick.
Yeah, but
that was the argument. Now, I'm not saying that I don't have a side either way on it. I think it, you know, people have choices and people make choices.
Correct.
And
everyone has agency, and they weren't coerced into this, and he wasn't promising like, hey, this is casting couch. You know, I'm about to watch me whack off and I'll launch your career. But I do, you know, it wasn't like a
but it is still kind of weird. Like, I get that. It is still weird. I love Louis. I've loved Louis.
Okay.
Is, you know, from early on, but it is still bizarre. Let's just say that.
It is bizarre. But yeah, it is. Of all the stories that came up, that one was kind of weird. But regardless, I mean, speaking about the culture at large, stand-up comedy in general, it kind of bores me at this point. Like, it's cool for a night out, but like, it's not what I watch for fun, and that's not really what I aspire to do. I like creating polished, packaged content and releasing it to the whole world, not just to whoever took the time to show up to this club and pay a cover and order 2 drinks. It's like, it's like, that's just not where it's at for me anymore. I think, young people, they don't grow up idolizing fucking David Letterman. They grow up, you know, they want to be Rucka Rucka. And, and again, like the culture has changed. Like, you go to a sketch comedy club and they're sitting around in the writer's room talking about what justifies a joke. Is it okay? It's okay for a character to be racist if we're laughing at the character. Like, oh, shut the fuck up. But that's what these people believe. They've turned comedy into an academic exercise, many of them. And that's what the culture is in LA, and probably in a lot of the comedy communities around the country, because a lot of them, again, went to the same types of schools and studied under the same types of people and have been influenced by a lot of the same thinkers. And that's just a lot of what's happening. It's
that, or is it trying to avoid a train wreck? You know, like the H&M fucking monkey hoodie thing. You know, someone goes, all right, did this run through someone's PR department? You know, did someone sign off on this? Who's the idiot that let this through? Maybe someone just wasn't sensitive. So, and now, you know, you had the entire internet and a bunch of people accusing H&M of being racist, which was ridiculous. So who's at fault there? If they had, say, an SJW in that position and they were like, oh, I'm offended, well, they would have avoided that controversy. And it's a company. They're trying to make a buck, you know. They don't.
Yeah. Well, a couple things. As far as like the comedians, the academic comedians, I believe I'm very not cynical, so I believe they believe what they're saying. I don't think it's a strategic way to avoid
Oh, all right.
train wreck. I do believe that they're social justice thinkers, whether or not they're passionate about it. Like, that's just the way they look at things. They see society as a bunch of groups, and they see comedy as a political tool. They see it. That's what comedy has become. But as far as coolest monkey on the block at H&M, think about the people working at H&M. Who's going to be the first one to speak up and say, hey guys, we're calling this black kid a monkey? Are you going to be the one to say that? Are you, like, which person in a culture where everyone's getting in trouble for everything? Who's going to be the one to put their neck on the line and risk being called racist for pointing out that the word monkey and black kid?
Oh, I get
That's a
it.
good point.
So that could be part of it too. Like, there's sort of this emperor has no clothes effect where nobody wants to be the first to point it out.
That's a good point.
But yet everyone wants to pile on. And almost always it seems to be white people arguing that this is offensive to blacks. And I don't see a ton of black people. I see an inordinate amount of white people being outraged for somebody else. That often don't get it at all. I mean, that's the thing. That's what I get.
Brian, we're getting into altruism. That's later in the show.
Yeah.
So in this case, I'm gonna.
I will say, just on the comedy topic, like, I really think those that are more raw do end up becoming more successful. I mean, if you look at Hannibal Buress with his bit with Cosby, I mean, that went viral, and then you have someone like Eric Andre or Justin Roiland with Rick and Morty. These are really raw concepts that they're in your face. They're entertaining. People love them because they do cross those bounds. Rucka Rucka Ali, we got him on the show. I mean, that's why he's got 159 million views on his channel, because people like that stuff. They like laughing at it because it's good to laugh at it. That takes the power away from it, and
yeah, you have societal
important.
pressures, man. And I was gonna, and this is gonna be a whole point about how much does the pressure of society have to do with what we produce and what we laugh at. And I don't want to walk outside and have people think that I'm some sort of racist or whatever. So I'm gonna try to conform to whatever the pressures are. It's an animal, man. And how are you gonna turn the tide? I don't know if it's possible.
It is possible. You just don't even acknowledge it. Just, we're all adults. I understand the part where you've got like a corporate gig that you might lose if you're targeted. So I completely understand that. But beyond that, it's like, just fuck it. I don't even describe what I do as like laughing at racism. It's just like, this is funny. Period. No, yeah, you know what I'm saying. But it's like,
yeah, exactly.
I think you have a unique view on this though, because you're you're kind of like, especially when I watch your videos, I get the sense that you're kind of like detached. You're like, all right, someone, you could come over and we could hang out, or I'll just hang out here by myself. And there are a lot of people who are like, no, I need people, I need friends, I need people around me. There are people who are those super social animals. There's no way that they're gonna say fuck this. I don't care what other people think.
Well, I certainly am. Having a social life is very important to me. A big reason I moved to LA. I mean, there might be some career opportunities for me, but I'm still doing basically the same thing I was doing in Detroit. Mm-hmm. But the main reason I came out here is because people are creative and people are kind of edgy out here. I mean, maybe not so much ironically in the comedy scene, but it's an edgy culture. People like offensive, and it's creative, and people are creating stuff. But yeah, a lot of my focus in recent years has been making friends, because I work at home, so I got to get out. I got to be, I mean, we all, so yeah, so I wouldn't say it's that I'm just kind of take it or leave it. In fact, my big criticism of my generation is that they are too non-social. They are too much plugged into their video games. I would like to see people be more sociable like I am. So, but as far as like not wanting to be looked at a certain way, I mean, you just kind of, it's occasionally come up, but like for the most part, it's like, if you make people laugh, what are they going to do? Like, I mean, very few people have actually confronted me about what I do. And like people put things in context, right? People compartmentalize things too. So somebody Somebody might be like very, very, you know, into the social justice thing, but they see my stuff and they just think it's funny and they're like, okay, he's a comedian. So the main thing is don't take their inventory. Like don't criticize, don't judge yourself on their behalf. You know, you just do what you're going to do and do it with confidence, and you just assume they're going to rise to the occasion of judging you fairly. But I think in a culture where everyone's afraid of what people think, when everyone's afraid of being called racist or being called anything, then it's very easy to target anyone. And the witch hunt is in full swing.
So yeah, I think it creates two problems. So one, you have a certain amount of self-censoring. Maybe that's taking place in comedy. Maybe they're believing the ideology, but then there's others that are simply, I can't, I'm not going to risk making that joke. But then the other thing that happens is you get certain groups of people, certainly like the anti-SJW, there's a faction that just love to be transgressive, that want to offend. They're purposely going to step over the line just to do it because they feel like I'm in too small of a box.
The trolling?
I don't give a damn anymore. Yeah, that you lost it to where if there's too big a limit, you'll be purposely transgressive, and I think that's what the community is done. I think that like Kekistan and all of this is purposely right in your face. Like, yeah, screw all of you. We don't care about anything that you say. So we've taken away all taboos.
Well, that's the rubber band snapping back and hitting you in the face. You know, that was bound to happen. That's the whole anti-SJW movement, is just a reactionary thing to this overreach.
Right, and perhaps a needed one.
Okay. No, maybe.
There's something healthy about it that I've always liked, but at the same time, like, it's not really my thing as much as people might associate with me with them, and as much as people might see me as like an OG anti-SJW. It was never really about that to me. Like I am a content creator. Like, to me, my message is positive. To me, it's like I'm having fun, and here's the product that I want to create. And the fact that it's offensive is like, yeah, it's like funny, like it's in your face, but yeah, it's there's so I've always, you know, like I told Ruben, there's something healthy and kind of original about what's been happening the last couple of years. And then at the same time, this type of thing has happened before, and what I like to focus on is, where is this heading? Where are we going? What are we for? Not just what are we anti?
Well, your other channels that you've started, and that's something we wanted to touch on. You know, they've really put you in a different light. You know, you got your gaming channel, which
amazing,
frankly,
hilarious.
I think it's trolling.
No, I
other
think it's
gaming
hilarious.
channels.
I think it's brilliant because all of these other Twitch channels are playing like Modern Warfare times Turbo 6.5 or whatever. I'm just making shit up, but he's playing Keen.
Which, by the way,
I love it.
Can I please give a shout?
I think it's hilarious.
That game was my entire childhood, and I know we're essentially the same. We're
hilarious.
We're like the same age, which now makes so much sense why you played that game. That when I saw that video of you playing it, I was like, oh fuck, he didn't grab all the balloons. He's not.
Well, and then you're like,
he's not a real Jew.
Some other piece.
Are
You're
you
like, I
kidding?
didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
How did this guy knew the levels? He's so, oh my god, I didn't realize you could get back up that way. That would have been way easier. I'm like, Jesus Christ, 20 years?
Yeah.
Well, this is another example of when people think I'm making some point and I'm not. Like, it's not that I'm making fun of first person shooters. I don't even know how to play those. Like, I can't play Mario 64. I'm literally like, side scrolling is all I play. So I'm playing Keen because that's my favorite thing to play.
He only walks right. Mario only walks to the right.
That's Donkey. I mean, I got Donkey Kong on right here behind me.
Nice.
I think it's brilliant because I mean, you know, obviously it looked like you were making a message, but it was funny. Like, I pull it up, I'm like, wait a minute, this is gaming channel, it's Keen. I just
you didn't even know what it was.
I was like,
I was like, leave this.
I knew it wasn't
need
from
this
the
right
last.
now.
I knew it wasn't on Xbox One. I knew that. I was
Don't
like, this is
shoot the
hilarious.
little red blob. He's your friend.
But yeah. So check out that channel, and then Rucka Reacts.
That's my new shit, man. That's it. That I'm hooked.
Wow, man, that's crazy. Like, I never know who's watching. Like, it's very strange to talk to like a fellow person, you know, creator or whatever, like someone who broadcasts themselves, who's remotely interested. in what I'm doing on that channel. So yeah, that channel started off as very, very long time ago. I was doing these kind of short, like in your face screaming on a topic type videos called Rucka's Black Background. I think I unlisted most of those. They were too cringe. I'll put them back up because fuck it, it's history. And then I started doing reactions to people reacting to my videos. So that became, but that was kind of semi in character. And then yeah, like about 6 months ago now or something, it was actually Sargon who suggested I do this after I went on his podcast. He told me, he said, you should do political videos. And I said, well, political, you mean like philosophical? Yeah, political. And I said, but I'm just one man. No, I said,
why does Sargon sound like Russell Brand?
It's like
they all sound the same.
Not the right English accent at all.
It's totally Russell Brand, though.
No, it's the chimney sweep from Mary fucking Poppins. That's what it is.
Yeah. So I said, I was like, it's like these guys on YouTube are so smart. All these skeptics and atheists, all these guys are so like they're so academic and stuff. And they've read all these books I've never heard of. I can't put myself out there and open myself up to scrutiny. And I mean, as I was saying it, I was sort of like walking it back, like, not that I should really give a shit. And he said, well, I think some of them would be scared at how smart you are. And I started naming different like people on YouTube that I watch or whatever, or that, I feel would be like dismissive and condescending. And he said, they're scientists. We're philosophers. We have the upper hand on them. So I thought, that was kind of what started me doing that. I did. And I heard, I heard Jordan Peterson say something on a panel that he did on YouTube, and like I really wanted to chime in, and I thought to myself, well, why not just do it? Like, why not just actually give my opinion? If it occurs to me and I want to say it, why not make that into a video? So that was my first commentary video.
That's why they're so fun, man. And that's why I started watching, because people are either, they're either super leftist and they're ripping these people for being, your right-wing racist misogynist, right? And that's,
don't forget ableist.
Who
and
wants
transphobe.
to watch that? Or it's people kissing their ass because they love them so much. And granted, I like all the people that you rip on, but I thought it was a really fresh perspective to see someone shit on the people who are really getting a big following on us. They need to be challenged.
What I loved, actually, and I was like trying to like imagine your cognitive dissonance in your brain when you're watching Rucka Reacts and he's talking about Ben Shapiro.
That was deep, man.
Because I agree with Rucka. Like, there's a lot of things about Ben I agree with, but there are some things I just can't get around, like the the religious thought and then the abortion and stuff. But I know you are huge, Dima, in the Ben Shapiro, so I thought that was interesting.
Well, I mean, my whole family fucking worships the guy, so there's that.
Even your grandmother?
No, they're in Russia. That doesn't count. Okay. They don't know who he is. So yeah. I mean, he's big there, and then I've got people who don't like him, and I've always thought, man, if I got to be in a Q&A, what would I ask him? Because I have so many. Obviously, it would be something I don't agree with him on. And Rucka, I was going to get your take on this. I feel like his stance on abortion is just fucking Loctite, man. I can't crack through that. He makes a lot of sense. I don't agree with him. I'm pretty staunchly pro-choice, and I think I heard in a video you were too. So I figured if you had to challenge him, what would you end up saying?
Oh, I think a lot of the things I said in that video, I would challenge him on ethics. So before we get to abortion, before we get to any particular government policy, I would just talk about what are ethics, what's right and wrong, what actions should a person properly take. And that's what he's not so used to being challenged on, because most people either agree with him that ethics come from God, or on the flip side, a lot of atheists or kind of secularists, they tell him that, no, well, ethics are arbitrary. It's, they're subjective. So
yeah.
Look, my only thing, I like all the people I've ripped on as well. I've not, or criticized as well. But my main thing against guys like Shapiro and Prager is stop pretending you haven't read Ayn Rand, or stop stop pretending you don't get what she's saying, like Prager especially. With Ben Shapiro, I'm sort of giving him a hard time because, hey man, come on, let's get this debate going. I realize he's got other shit on his mind, but I don't like I don't like him being dismissive. It's like he talks about morality. You must speak the language of morality. Morality is how we're going to win this battle. And I'm only looking to talk about morality with him. I'm not arguing with him about politics. My whole thing against him is that he's not capitalist enough. He doesn't have the ethical backup for capitalism. He can't justify it on ethical grounds. So, I mean,
are you splitting morality and ethics into two different buckets?
No, I'm using them interchangeably.
Okay,
but he makes the ethical argument that capitalism has done more good. It's raised more people out of poverty than anything. So if you look at pound for pound what it's done, like that's the ethical argument. It's
right.
Still a realistic one, but that's the ethical one.
Yes, but in order for something raising our standard of living to be ethical, that presumes that what's good for me is ethical. And if being selfish is inherently evil, therefore, who am I to demand a system of freedom that raises my standard of living?
But I don't know if religion says that selfishness in itself is evil. I mean, is it selfish to eat when you're hungry? I mean, that is the ultimate selfish act, but nobody says eating is bad.
I agree that you must be selfish to survive and live, which is why so many people on this planet feel guilty for doing nothing wrong. Because on one hand, you need to be selfish to live, and you need to use reason to live. On the other hand, you're being told by virtually everyone that being selfish is either neutral or bad, and that reason is at best amoral, neither moral nor immoral, and at worst will drive you to do bad things because it's, quote, rational. So there's definitely, yeah.
But the family portion, though, this is where, I'm with you. I'm an almost objectivist, Ayn Rander, but it doesn't explain kids, especially an infant. Like a 3-month-old infant it takes, and it's never wrong. Like it is the ultimate altruism to take care of that. It seems like the human race would stop if we all became objectivists. You would think that, God, I don't want kids. What a pain in the ass. Like it seems like that.
Well, first off, okay, sorry to interrupt.
Altruism.
Well, can you repeat the last sentence?
All of taking care of kids, especially an infant.
Okay.
That's altruism.
So we need to define what we mean by altruism. Altruism in its proper definition, as by the people who invented the term, is otherism. Putting others above yourself. When you bring a child into the world, you are now engaged in a contract. First off, just on a very obligatory sense, you are obligated to take care of this infant that you chose to deliver into the world, right? That the infant did not ask to. So just as far as what you're obligated to do, you did agree to that. You did enter into a contract to either take care of this infant or find someone who is willing to care for the infant. But on an ethical, as far as selfishness versus altruism, if that baby is of value to you, is it a sacrifice? Like, is it altruism? Is it putting some? Now, altruism would be to let your baby go hungry so that your neighbor's baby can eat. That would be altruism. Altruism is putting other people above yourself, other people's values above your own values.
What if you went hungry to feed your neighbor's baby?
If you went hungry to feed your neighbor's baby, I mean, you would have to assess the situation. And these are very strange.
I don't want to do like weird examples, but that's what I was going to ask you is that nurture? Is that like, if I see that in a movie, I see, the Holocaust, and then the guy given a piece of bread to the little kid, but he's not eating it himself. And I go, oh, that's courageous. It's this personification of strength. Is that just because I'm bred from, day one just to be weaned on altruism that I think that's a moral move? Or
well, two things. That type of nobility, so like that type of benevolence, I think is a sign of loving life, of valuing life, of seeing a child and saying, I can afford to skip a meal, and I love life, and this child is even more helpless than I am in this situation, and I'm willing to give my piece of bread to this child. So it's, you know, I don't think the ethics of egoism says you should always only think about yourself and let everyone else get fucked. I think someone who loves life doesn't want to see a kid go hungry. But again, it's a matter of degrees. It's a matter of your hierarchy of values. If you are on the verge of starving, then you absolutely should be the one to eat before you even think of anyone else. But more importantly than that, the fact that these ethical discussions take us to the Holocaust, and they take us to lifeboats, and they take us to burning buildings, that's not what ethics are essentially for. The human species, we're not wired, we're not equipped to live in concentration camps. We are wired to trade voluntarily and to live free. That is a requirement for living. When we talk of human rights, we don't just mean conditions we would enjoy. We're saying rights as in requirements for living, actions that are proper for human survival and flourishing. So I need to be free to think and to act and to trade. And that is where the purpose of ethics is to live in a condition that is proper to a human being on Earth. So
you always say take ideas to the nth degree. I mean, that's your big thing, right?
Right.
So wouldn't that be doing it in this case?
Not exactly, because we only got to a concentration camp because the Germans have abandoned reason, or in large part never embraced it. The Germans were anti-Enlightenment culture, and Europe at large had turned their back on Aristotle. They turned their back on reason, and then they certainly turned their back on any sort of rational egoism. I mean, they'd never heard the phrase. And then they turned their back on capitalism. So you had people that are largely unfree, living in a situation where every decision is a Sophie's choice. You're in every decision, either someone's got to suffer. That's just, and that was a big objective of the Nazis, was to put you in situations where there is no right choice. They wanted to hammer into you this idea that you cannot be rational and make a correct decision, that you will not be rewarded for doing the right thing or punished for doing the wrong thing, because there is no right and wrong. They were at war with the very idea of cause and effect and adherence to reality. But that's not where human civilization takes place. The United States in its freer periods is the closest thing we've come to a proper environment for human beings to live. And that's, once ethics establishes that once ethics, or once philosophy and ethics, including ethics and politics, demonstrates that we are suited to live free, that in order to live, we need to be free to think, we need to be free to act, and then to trade with one another, and to have our rights protected by the government, then the ethical questions, the specifics of ethics might get a little tricky in certain situations. But I mean, to jump over to a lifeboat or to a concentration camp, that's not what ethics are for. Like, if you and I are in the jungle right now, right, and it's 100,000 BC, and we're deciding what actions should we take to survive and to live. First off, we have to think. We have to understand that this reality we're seeing around us, it does exist. No matter how many fucking skeptic, new atheist, subjectivist games you want to play. Well, it could all be somebody's dream. Yeah, well, this fucking tiger is about to eat you, so you better decide.
Yeah, but Rucka, you know what we're gonna do in that sense? I'm not gonna be like, all right, peace the fuck out, I'm going this way. I'm gonna say, all right, it's better if we cooperate, right, and you and me hang out in the jungle and we watch each other's backs. So there's that collectivist, community kind of approach. This is why I think you railed on tribalism in one of the. No, you played a clip of someone going, yeah, we should be individualist, but also we're tribalist. I kind of side with that. I mean, at the end of the day, I did this hypothetical with my wife the other day. I was like, listen, the fucking zombie apocalypse happens tomorrow, or North Korea nukes the shit out of us. Yeah. Who do you what do you do? You're not going to stay in your house. No. You need a group to survive. Friends, and I'm like, all right, well, either I would drive 6 hours back to Michigan and, chill with my family, or I'm like, you know what? This isn't sad, but what I would do is the Jewish community. That's the first place I would go to in Milwaukee.
You wouldn't come to Brian's house?
Fuck, you guys are going to go back to your family.
Christ.
All right. Listen,
all of those Ben Shapiro meals, right? Like I've got for 20 years.
No, my whole point is that you run to your tribe, and if you can't identify, who's going to be in that tribe with you, we devolved to that point, at the 11th hour. So, we have to think in that regard sometimes.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm happy to announce that Blue Apron just panned out. It's for if you put in code Ben Shapiro, you get your kosher zombie apocalypse survival. But okay, so let me get this straight. We've got zombie apocalypse, we've got Holocaust, and we've got we're in the jungle. The reason I brought up the jungle was not to imply that that's where humans live and ought to be, and that all decisions should be based upon how to behave in a wild jungle. I was just saying, if we're going to take away all these freak situations where we're starting from scratch, where we're two people and the monkeys have their mode of survival and the plants have their mode of survival, what's the uniquely human mode of survival? It's reason. And the only way we're going to get past that initial emergency situation of sort of tribal type behavior that our great ancestors were in way back when, the only way we're going to get back that is to form a civil order in which every individual is free, where the only purpose of the government is to protect your rights as an individual, where nobody is dictating what you ought to do. So yeah, these emergency measures of like, all right, let's cooperate. I mean, yeah, we should cooperate. I mean, division of labor is what gets us out of poverty. It's what gets us out of the jungle. It's what allows us to clear out the jungle. Fuck the jungle. We put the jungle in a fucking cage. We put it behind an aquarium. We fucking run this show, but we have to use reason. And I think it's demonstrable that the only way the world gets safer and cleaner and technology continues to develop and people find greater degrees of happiness is in an individualistic, free society. So yeah, you're jumping to a zombie apocalypse and saying, yeah, if worse came to worse, I would run back to the Jews. We don't live in a zombie apocalypse. It's very sad when the world is up in shambles and you need to run to which in-group do I have to turn to for this emergency. That's not the purpose of ethics, and that's not the world we live in. If we're rational, we have the means to take on this jungle around us and to make the world more suitable for us. By the way, including a zombie apocalypse. In a rational society, a zombie disease breaks out, we're better off using reason and a rational society, a free society is better equipped to handle that than is a primitive one or a collectivist one.
I'm with you on the individual part. Like individualism, I think is central. We cannot be like pushed in collectives. It takes away all your agency, and I think it's oppressive and suppressive. It sucks. But if we're going to give individual freedoms, we also have to give those who want to be altruistic that freedom to do so. And I think that's going to be normal. I mean, it's bred into our genes to cooperate.
Yeah.
Wolves do this. Like once a species is cooperative, once it's social, it evolves as a group and packs, and not as an individual. Like
try to survive as an individual in prison. You know, you're gonna get fucked, literally.
Oh my god! Hold on. We got zombie apocalypse, prison, concentration camp.
Yeah, but these are. I mean,
no,
your brain goes there.
But the tribal portion. I mean, you are programmed to want. Even in the zombie apocalypse, you're going to see friends turn against each other, and you would think, "Oh wow, how could you betray me?" And then you're going to see amazing acts of kindness where some person the Jewish center takes in some guy off the street that's just begging to get in. Like you'll see both of those things.
That wouldn't
will
happen.
see both.
Listen, you said altruism is bred into us like we're wolves. Wolves, they operate in packs and they do it automatically, as far as I know. Listen, we do trade with one another. We do want to have people with us. We do care about people. We do value one another. However, altruism is self-sacrifice, and no other species has ever done that. No other species has ever hurt themselves for any reason whatsoever. We are the only species that is capable of acting as our own destroyer and have spent most of our history doing just that.
Sound the alarm.
Well, and like Mother, whatever,
Teresa?
Gazelle. Yeah, Mother gazelles will like attack the lion so that their cub can get away, or their whatever, the baby gazelle can get away. I mean, there's plenty of examples in nature, but I don't want to move away from humans.
Well, no, because this is, I mean, a mother defending her cub is what she's naturally.
Right, because there's a direct genetic link, but in ground squirrels, that they'll pop up to sound the alarm and put themselves at risk to warn everybody else. And again, like they're not necessarily related.
I don't think animals, at least the lower level ones, I mean, maybe there's an example of certain monkeys or certain animals showing signs of reason, but by and large, animals don't make choices. Animals do not make moral decisions. Morality.
No, it's not moral. It's not moral.
Right. Right. So we, as human beings, we do have a choice.
Mhm.
You know, if you fully insist that altruism is part of our DNA, even then I would say, so what? Either, by the way, that gene must have skipped me, because because I'm not altruistic. I'm benevolent. I'm generous. I think the people that know me would say I've been called selfless by people that didn't know any better, but a big part of what drove me to depression in my younger years, a big part of what made me frustrated and what made the world seem like such a miserable place, as it still seems to so many people, is the fact that ethics was perceived as the enemy, that what I want is inherently wrong because I want it, and what is moral is inherently not what I want, not in my interest. And that's a fucked up, discombobulated way to approach the world. Every animal acts in its own interest, whether it knows it or not. Every plant grows in the direction it needs to grow to live. And to say that altruism is bred into us, that we were meant to be altruistic, I mean, we would really have to define what we mean by altruism and what and if we're conflating.
I wouldn't say meant to be. I'm just saying, like in part like in a population, right? How do gay and lesbian exist in a population if they're not reproducing for the most part? Because it could have a fitness effect on the overall group, right? And then you could have this. This is, you've seen the same way this works with weird genetic anomalies like sickle cell anemia. That gene exists and it screws some people because it benefits others. So you could have the same thing, that a certain amount of altruism in the people, not everyone has it, will benefit the group as a whole. And remember, this is not in modern society that we evolved in a tribal society. This is 100,000 years ago.
I think, I agree with Rucka here. And I think one of the things we're missing is where the human race is very vulnerable is purpose. And this is where religion is really just sold this invisible product and made us feel guilty to the point where we have to do a lot of these things, because it's like a living role-playing game where you're getting certain points for doing certain things, because at the end you're going to go to somewhere that you're going to enjoy forever. So a lot of times altruism and people actually doing things for others doesn't actually come from a good place. It actually still comes from a very selfish place, in the sense that if I do this, I know either I feel better about myself, or I just made some brownie points for Yahweh, and I'm going to make sure I'm going to be in the seventh heaven. I mean, so I totally understand where Rucka's coming from. Again, if
it's not exactly what I'm saying. So a lot of people, they do behave a certain way because they believe they're going to heaven, but by and large, ethics drives people in terms of what they think is right and wrong to do. People act against their own interests a lot and have done so a lot. And I would even say instances like the Soviet Union could only exist because of altruism, because of the ethics of religion in their secularized form, where Stalin says, I'm doing this for the people. And if anyone protests, he says, oh, you're selfish. That's how these things have been carried out. It is the ethics of altruism.
Altruism to the nth degree. And I agree that too much altruism is bad.
Listen, is there a healthy amount of suicide? Is there a good amount of self-destruction that's good for society or good for any individual person? Because that's what altruism is suicide. And I think you're focusing way too much on this, like what we're meant to do by genes and what nature wanted us to do. If nature wanted us to do something, nature wanted us to reason, because that's our only means of survival. We're not strong. We're not fast. We're only smart. We're only capable of thinking and of adjusting the environment to suit our needs. So we are not genetically designed to function and to live in small tribes in the jungle, living till we're 19 and mostly dying when we're young. We were meant to do this. I was meant to be plugged into my computer, talking to you across the continent over the internet. we were meant, this is human nature. This is what we were supposed to do. We're supposed to invent things. We're supposed to use technology. We're supposed to pursue values. I don't buy into this sort of commonplace belief that what savages did in the jungle is what, quote, nature, end quote, wanted us to do.
How about if we so if we move away from the biological inherited element, the real thing I wanted to ask you about on this topic is how, let's say that hypothetically I agree with the premises that objectivism is good, that we should ultimately be a selfish, I think it's good to be a selfish society. But who was it? Was it Dave maybe made this point? He's like, how do we make this palatable to the average person, to the average human? We can explain things, of course, but if you have something like someone literally dying on the street because they can't have access to healthcare, I'll take the example that's always used. Someone inevitably is gonna say, listen, we're an affluent society, everyone's walking around with phones, like, and we can't spare, $2 to help this guy and heal him, because the objectivist answer is going to say, no, it's a selfish society, the person should take care of himself. What is the response to that type of human suffering that inevitably is going to be brought up by the other side?
Well, there's so much, like every step of that, I wanted to jump in. First off, it's not that a selfish society is what's best. It's that here's a code of ethics that's good for me in my life, and it is working for me and has helped me find material and spiritual success. So it's not so much about what kind of society I want to live in. That kind of comes later in the game. So if I'm talking to you, I would ask you, what is it about this you can't swallow before we talk about how to spread this message to others. But, as far as how to approach a homeless guy, again, like we have to look at the context and which era of history are we in? Is this is this at the point once the economy is deregulated and privatized and people are free? Is this at a time when that guy could easily find a job, when there are more jobs than people to fill them? Or is this in our horrible mixed economy where this homeless guy is not only the victim of a mixed economy, is not only a victim of a violation of property rights resulting in mass poverty, but more significantly, he is a victim of 2,000 years of religious ethics secularized by the modern philosophers, making him feel inherently guilty for doing nothing wrong and driving him to a life of addiction and of incoherence. So I mean,
not that I want to ground it more in a specific. So I literally cut my arm. I'm bleeding to death. Right now, I walk into an emergency room and there's a law. It's a federal law that says that they have to treat me. Right? They can't refuse treatment,
regardless if you got insurance or not.
Right? In a utopian, purely objectivist society, what happens? For whatever reason, I don't have a dollar. I don't have whatever it is to be able to, like, how does an objectivist deal with that type of scenario?
If objectivism, if we are in a quote objectivist society, that means objectivism has been largely embraced by the intellectuals, right, and has largely swept the culture. So reason and rational self-interest has already taken the culture before the political change even began to take place. So now we're at a point where somebody, by no fault of his own or for whatever reason, needs emergency care. I would think there would be charities for that very purpose. I think there would be people who are looking out. There would be social workers. There would be charities there for those types of situations. But again, jumping to I know you mentioned earlier these unique situations are sometimes a little bit beyond the point, bit beside the point. That's not the main. I mean, that guy with the cut arm or the homeless guy, they're much better off in a rational society and in a free one.
Well, the reason why I bring them up is because it's a lot of times philosophers or people who talk about higher level ideas, they fail to bring them down to the ground level so people can understand. So I'm listening to your Rucka Reacts channel, and a lot of this stuff makes sense, and I go, all right, what if I had to confront you with something? What would I throw at you and have you have to answer in order to make this make sense to me. So the guy suffering on the street was one, and I think frankly, if we go through that thought experiment, you'd have to have a lot of people die up until the point that the collective realizes that, you know, this would be a way of life. And frankly, I don't think that they would buy it. But let's take a totally different example, and that is if the whole society is purely capitalist, we totally take away anything that's state-owned, and that includes like my energy bill, for example. What prevents, I know there was something about the fact that monopolies can't exist because competition could arise, and that, you know, We Energies, which is our local energy company, couldn't just cut our lights because we fail to pay their exorbitant rates. But if they did do that, I mean, the government is there to prevent them from doing this. It would take, I don't know how many years for a competitor to build out alternative infrastructure for me to get my lights back on. So I would have to cave to that system. And, you know, I would suffer for X number of years before something changed. So are you saying that in order for us to really get to an ideal objectivist society, we would have to go through certain periods of upheaval where people do take advantage of other people until, you know, it kind of stabilizes?
No, because my goal is not to bring about political change. That's something a libertarian might have to answer for you, because libertarians are focused on politics and only politics. I don't want to impose, you know, liberty on people that don't want it. I'm not trying to. I mean, yes, I would like to privatize everything as fast as possible. I do think these problems would solve themselves rather quickly if, for instance, and I know this came up with like net neutrality, if ISPs were allowed to get as big as they want and to buy out other big companies, then a lot more of them would lay out infrastructure going into the game, because currently a lot of them don't, because they don't think, they know they're not going to be allowed because of antitrust and because of monopolies and all that shit. They're not allowed to. In a purely free economy, I think you would see a lot of these problems solve themselves. But I'm focused on, first of all, I'm focused on the very personal realm, on personal ethics, and on kind of the lower branches of philosophy. I think in this scenario where like you're naming these hypotheticals where they still sound like a mixed economy, where it would take years for a new company to lay out infrastructure. These things tend to happen very quickly when there's a free economy. But I hate to even argue about that, because that's, first of all, that's not what I'm good at. I mean, someone in the comments is saying you're not good at anything, you fag. But like arguing about specifics of how a free market would work is not what I'm good at. It's not something I'm particularly educated about. I mean, volumes have been written about private roads and stuff like that. That's not really what I'm good at. What I think I'm decent at is explaining what the ethics of rational egoism can mean in the personal realm, because that's where I've mostly focused on them. And I think that's the first step towards
the only reason I brought that up is because, you know, you have these response videos to a Ben, to a Jordan Peterson doesn't really talk about politics. But they're trying to offer up an alternative system of governance to what we have now, which is, I don't know, democratic rule or whatever it is, prop up the conservative party, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm looking at your ideas and go, all right, this shit makes sense. How would we, you know, practically speaking, implement this? How would we, you know, who would we elect? What would we do? Because that's where I'm a very practical person. That's pragmatic. That's where my mind goes, is how do I make this shit happen? If I believe in it, if I believe Rucka, how do I implement this in my life? I'm not going to stop watching maybe Ben Shapiro videos, but maybe I'm going to support a different politician. So that's where my questions come from. We're very, very pragmatic.
Yeah, I think the most pragmatic thing to do is to realize that there is no politician worth supporting very enthusiastically right now, and that politics is the final stage of the game. My main issue with Ben Shapiro is that he calls capitalism, quote, forced altruism, that he tries to make the point that, oh, altruism is still the moral ideal, but capitalism is consistent with that. Bullshit. Capitalism is the selfish system. And that's why we've been unable, guys like me have been, or like-minded people with myself have been unable to defend it. That's why we've moved away from capitalism. No matter how much it demonstrably raises our standard of living, we continue to say, oh yeah, don't give those companies freedom. That's what they want. That's what those companies want. How many times during the net neutrality debate did people bring up what the companies want? Oh, that's what the companies want. Who gives a fuck what they want? Why does what they want inherently conflict with what I want as a consumer? It's just like they're automatically the bad guys. So my whole thing with Ben Shapiro is not that his politics are right or wrong. It's just that his ethics are incorrect. And I don't think and similarly with Dennis Prager, I went at him first about his lawsuit against Google that he can't say he's pro-capitalism and then do that. But more importantly, I spent the other, 28 minutes of my video on him talking about his ethics, talking about his philosophy. And that's where the real conversation ought to take place. So, I mean, if you're being pragmatic, if you're hearing me talk about these ideas, you might think to yourself, like, how would this help me be more successful in my life, in my relationships, in my career? If unless you've got that all covered already, or even if you are doing great, if you seem like a fine young man, but what do you?
I thank you.
Do you feel? Dimitri, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel moral? Do you get brownie point? Like, are you proud of yourself when you succeed? Do you say, I did the moral thing whenever you succeed at your career?
Absolutely.
Because, well, you should. Good. You should. But now, obviously, in the culture at large, if you walk up to the average person and say, I did a moral thing today, I made $1,000 doing what I love, they would say, well, what was the moral thing you did? Like at best, you succeeded at doing something selfish, and you might want to think about sending a few of those bucks over to Africa.
We're with you there. No, it's important to go to work. Like you have to do what you like. Hopefully you're doing what you like.
Yeah, look, my main thing, I want to live in a society where people who are rationally selfish, who pursue careers and who bring their visions to life, I want to live in a world where those guys that are already doing it, that already have that passion, guys that don't need to be encouraged, that are already, there's not enough hours in the day for them to do everything they want to do. I want those guys to have moral confidence. I want them to stand tall.
I think
they don't. Many of them don't. Many of them feel guilty, and that's why Bill Gates is spending his life throwing his money into a black hole when he should be.
So much.
Zuckerberg
but
too.
why
Zuckerberg,
not? Why not?
I
He
don't
has more
think
money
that's a
than he
black
could spend.
hole.
But hey, but you remember, like you mentioned, though. Let's talk about a real world example. In the late 19th century, you kind of said that's like the most freest we ever been. But what did Andrew Carnegie do? The Bill Gates of that area. He gave all his money away, and we still have libraries.
And he should not have. That's my point, is that the ethics of religion never left. The Enlightenment changed how we look at knowledge, right? The scientific revolution, and the Enlightenment brought about political freedom. Suddenly, individuals were free to become billionaires and to, work if they wanted to work and do what they want. And all those in politics and in knowledge, right? Epistemology, the Enlightenment changed everything. But when it came to ethics, religion never left us. That's why altruism is still the norm. That's why being selfish is still regarded as a bad thing, and sacrificing yourself is still considered a good thing. And I don't know anything about Carnegie per se on this situation, but if that's what he did, that's because of ethics. He should not have just given it away. He should have invested it in growing it further and spending every minute of his life pursuing his passion, which was creation.
But what if his passion changed? And but at the same time, too, in this kind of 1870s landscape, you don't have any welfare system at all, right? But what is the welfare system? If you come over into Ellis Island, where do you go? The first place you go is Tammany Hall in New York, right? That was the charity. That was the charity that every poor immigrant went to. And one of the problems and why we have our welfare state is that charity was working just fine until Boss Tweed and his cronies got a hold of it and wrecked it. So kind of there was a sense then in that late 19th century America that private charities will become corrupted by such an influence, and maybe the government needs to take it over. Like, had it not been for that scandal, we may not have public welfare today, and still private charities would be taking care of like a lot of the charity.
I don't know the facts about what was taking place in New York in that time. I do know that although we came very close to being laissez-faire. We were not completely there. And those small places where government and big business were in bed together is what brought about, to my knowledge, is what brought about the need for unions, is what brought about people, feeling resentful towards big business. So also the government subsidizing things they never should have subsidized. They subsidized the railroads, which nobody asked them to do. The government brought about antitrust legislation towards the end of that century, which is a enormous violation of rights. And, going after so-called monopolies. Again, private property to me is private property. So, but I do believe that the need for charity would be very minimal in a free society. I think the best thing you can offer somebody is a job. That's what people want. Even like if you've ever met like a mentally retarded person, nothing makes them happier than having a job. Like they get to go bag your food at the supermarket. That gives them such a sense of self-esteem. And I think we can all learn a thing or two from that. Like people want self-esteem. People by and large, they want work. So the best thing Carnegie can offer people, if he wants to offer them something, is a job. And yeah, so some people, a very small number of people, are unable to provide for themselves, and we can all voluntarily pitch in to help them out if they're down on their luck. But it's such an exception that the fact that we bring it up so early on in the discussion, I think again tells you about this worldview where the meek shall inherit the earth, where everyone needs to be focused on those who can't provide for themselves, and what that really does to our psychology, as good doers, is we look for people that are suffering, and we subconsciously want to see more of them, because that's our outlet for morality. The only way we can be moral is to give up what we've earned to someone who cannot or will not earn it.
Well, but I think that also goes to purpose too. Like when you're talking about the mentally challenged person that's doing that, he's, that's giving them purpose. Again, I think we all strive for that, but also there comes a point in your life where there's legacy. So when you have, some of that too, like a Bill Gates, it's made a shit ton of money, he's never going to spend it in his life. I think you start getting to that point where you're like, even you, Rucka, where you're like, yeah, I want people to remember me. What can I do to, have that happen outside of whatever I've created? So I think there's some of that too that goes in that, as far as investing in other people or other technologies, just to see them grow, because that's part of your legacy too.
I think it's preventing, let's call it evil from rising. So the whole idea of charity is there's maybe an altruistic element. I agree. There are people who actually want to give, but maybe the Bill Gates of the world and others, they see that it is a pressure valve. It's a pressure release valve for people not to come and attack them and steal their shit. And that was the whole idea of conservatism, is like, give a little, like just allow money to seep to the bottom levels so that they're just happy enough where they're not going to pick up their pitchforks and revolt. And that's been the whole idea of maybe moderated conservatism, moderated capitalism. So when I hear I would say that, the extreme version of capitalism, the Ayn Randian, that's always my question is, do you honestly think that the have-nots won't go, there's a lot more of us, let's pick up a rock and kill you? That's what I'm always afraid of. And so my personal politics, I don't think I'll ever be, super conservative, because I know that that's always a risk. And that's always something that we need to protect against. So I don't know what your take on that is, or if you've ever been afraid of that, of the communists coming and, getting into power because there are too many rich, or no, the rich are too rich and the poor are too poor.
So first and foremost, just for anyone who's unclear, so Ayn Rand and myself are not conservatives, and I regard conservatives as the problem here. They're the ones who won't give up their stubborn position, where they're just clinging to altruism, and politically they're only, as Michael Malice says, they're progressives that are driving the speed limit. They want what progressives of yesteryear wanted, and they're just telling progressives to slow down. But I know that wasn't your question. I don't see people. The first step of philosophy is, how do we gain knowledge, and that's where reason comes in, and what's real. So in a rational society, the poor want to make money. They want to work. They're proud of what they have, and they're temporarily embarrassed millionaires. And that's why, you know, in the age of reason, you had people from all corners of the globe, or at least from Europe, at least people that were allowed to come to the U.S., using every penny they had to get on a filthy boat and float over to the U.S., hoping to just get a shitty paying job and have a chance to elevate their life. I don't think so. This kind of Marxist view that each social class has their own consciousness and their own perspective on things, that may be the case in some cultures, but this is why culture is shaped by philosophy. So this is why it's important for us to begin with reason, to begin with then ethics and which I think should be rational egoism. And after that, you bring about the political change that you'd like to bring about. So yeah, if we just have rich people here and poor people there, and the poor are irrational, the poor might try to storm the homes of the rich. But in a rational society, that's obviously not what they would do. I think human nature is yeah.
Well, that's the big disconnect. Is I think you have way more. You believe in human nature. I have a pessimistic view, maybe a Petersonian view, if that's ever going to be used. And you have a very positive view of, oh yeah, people are just gonna, you know, they're gonna behave the best, and they're gonna do. I'm afraid of people. I think they're
animals. I don't know how you can be so afraid of people. We live in the most like open. We're all so vulnerable to being attacked at any time.
I agree, and I think it's on a knife's edge. I mean, I don't know what made me think of it, but the other day I'm like, shit. I mean, this could go south any day of the week. I literally could.
He's been watching way too much Walking Dead.
No,
or Mr. Robot.
I'm not talking about the whole zombie thing, but people are violent fucking human beings. And the more that I watch the Sargon getting attacked 2 days ago, Jordan Peterson getting attacked 1 day ago, this stuff is, I mean, people are very violent in their hearts. And I'm hoping that it's a small minority, but it could take one national some sort of catastrophe to just flip people on their head and have them marching with tiki torches. That's personally how I feel, and it's a scary thought.
Were those did Sargon get attacked by poor people because he's rich? Or they were motivated by ideas. They were motivated by philosophy. This is why philosophy is what drives history. This is why it's important. This is why we can't skip over philosophy and just implement political change. We need to talk about what's right and wrong. In the world of Antifa, they're doing the right thing.
Right.
Or they're doing the thing they should do because they've rejected reason so hard that they don't even, their entire mission statement is do what you feel like. Just, attack who you think is bad. They've done away with reason. They've done away with values whatsoever. They're like a new level of depraved. But socialists of the past that were storming shit, they weren't all poor necessarily.
Yeah,
many of them, they were middle class or even upper class people they believed in socialism.
They believe they certainly believe they're being moral. Like they're absolute moral absolutists.
And according to conventional ethics, according to altruism, they are moral. They are punishing the rich and they are giving allegedly going to give to the poor.
And not all. I mean, if you take the Jews, and this is where a lot of the Jewish conspiracies arise from, is from the rise of the Soviet state was largely fueled by Jewish radicals who were sick and tired of the local population picking on the Jews. And so they thought, well, if we make this totally egalitarian, totally equal state, we will be equal to the local Russians who were living on the land, and they got it massively wrong. But that's where 20th century anti-Semitism stemmed from, as they thought that communism was some sort of Jewish ideal, or Jews just were tired of getting attacked in the pogroms. I mean, that's really
the reason that many Jews were communists is because communist is altruist, and many of those Jews were concerned with morality, and they thought communism was the fair thing to do. I don't think people are primarily motivated by bettering their own circumstances. I think people are largely driven by ethics. And because communism is the embodiment of altruism, many Jews, as well as many others, supported it and continue to do so, even though it clearly is a slaughterhouse. But, you know, over in Nazi Germany, they believed that the individual comes only after the collective, and the collective in their case was the Aryan race. So if altruism is correct, then who says it shouldn't be the Aryan race that is, you know, supreme? Who said it has to be the proletariat like the communists said? Why not the Aryan race? If we're going to be altruists, then it is going to end up just being arbitrary if the other, if the collective, if the larger body should be the poor, if it should be the community, the race. It's going to be someone other than the individual. There's individualism, and then there's everything else. All these different forms of collectivism, as far as I'm concerned, they go in one category.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right in that a certain amount of healthy like selfishness, like the egoism, I think is Ayn Rand maybe used that term, but that I think is just fine, and I think it's actually good because altruism run amok is clearly bad. Now you get off on nationalism. Why is civic nationalism bad? Because
come on,
I'm not
even I'll disagree with you on this, Brian.
But why is a little bit of civic nationalism bad?
Because
they shouldn't have the Olympics.
I mean, the Olympics are fine. That's a sporting event.
Come on, there's a certain you have to be a nationalist to like the Olympics.
That's true.
It's fun. It's like going to a baseball game and rooting for your home team. I don't give a shit about that. It's not what I'm interested in. But that's not the same thing as sacrificing the rights of the individual or saying that your rights are given to you by the state, which is what nationalism essentially says. Listen, if you're saying nationalism is defending a country against aggressors, I'm with you. But that's not what nationalism is. That's not what it was when it was invented by progressives. Nationalism says that the state should take action to, you know, help the economy, to, quote, create jobs, to limit the rights of the individual. They tell you what you should produce, what you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to do. The progressives of the early 20th century were insane. Like, it's insane that it happened in this country, some of the shit that went down. Like, it's almost like I mean, we were like, this was a fascist country, and we actually like made it partially out of it. Like, it's insane what went on. But nationalism, again, people conflate. We do a lot of package dealing. There's a phrase for you. So when you say altruism, listen. When you say altruism, what I'm hearing you doing is you're packaging kindness and generosity with sacrificing yourself for shit that doesn't matter to you, that doesn't benefit you in any way. You're packaging those things together, and then you're saying, okay, a little bit of altruism could be a good thing, but not too much. And then on nationalism, again, you're packaging together defense of a nation, or the mere existence of a nation, and not that nation not allowing itself to be attacked by another nation. You're packaging that with rationing food and telling people how they're allowed to live. So we need to be clear what we mean by these words and what are the principles that we stand for.
I'll be okay. So I just to take a pause from the nationalism, because you just mentioned it. I have a slightly different view of altruism, and what I'll use is collectivism in this case. I'll go back because this is a concrete point that we can talk about. Nationalized healthcare. Obviously, you're against it, Brian. I'm sure you're against it. In this case, it's a selfish point of view. I think that right now I don't need healthcare, and I have enough money where I could pay for it if I wanted to. Am I willing to pick a percentage from my paycheck to pay into the kitty for everyone else to get healthcare? Okay, because tomorrow I might not have a job. I might just be broke as shit, and I might get a heart attack. So I am essentially paying into the collectivist insurance pool so that one day I might be able to get healthcare. So can the selfish view of me, driving toward a collectivist idea not coexist? Is that not something that's possible?
No, because this is why philosophy is it's more than just the range of the moment decision. So in order to live on Earth, you need to be free. You need to have the right to think unobstructed, and the right to produce, and the right to your property. As soon as that's violated, you've essentially lost your rights. So to violate people's rights just enough for us to have socialized medicine, they don't have rights anymore, and now
Wait,
neither do we.
What's being violated? I mean, I'm willing to give 5% or whatever it is.
Well, you're not saying you're willing to. You're saying you're willing to have everyone be forced to give 5%.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All right. Fine. Okay.
So that's the thing. Listen, I want everyone to have everything. I want everyone to have health care, and I think more people would. By the way, again, what raises everyone's standard of living more than a free market? And like, people act like they're so concerned with the poor. No, they're not. They're concerned with hating the rich. They're concerned with disparity. They're concerned with inequality. If you want the poor to be happy and to get health care, the best thing we can do is deregulate. The best thing we can do is let businessmen be businessmen. But again, like, I hate even having this, free market argument when that's not really the main point of what life is about. Life is about much deeper things than politics. It's about what's real. So much of what Ayn Rand gets mocked for and dismissed for is her basic bottom levels of philosophy, her metaphysics, her epistemology. It's the new atheists that are most guilty of not giving her due. It's the Sam Harrises of the world that won't talk to her students. It's Richard Dawkins. Look, Richard Dawkins is a secularized Christian. He talks about morality like it's interchangeable with altruism. He talks about the altruist gene.
Yeah.
He ought to talk to an objectivist, but look, nobody takes us seriously. Like, I didn't even know who I was going to be talking to today. I didn't know if you guys had really heard of me, if you had seen any of my work. I didn't know if I was going to bring up the name Ayn Rand and you guys would just like kind of look at each other like, oh, that's who we're talking to.
Who's that? What?
But
What band is she in?
Yeah, no. Like, you would look at each other like, oh, we got one of those retards on here. Like,
we do our fucking homework, Rucka.
Hell yeah. That obviously, but
should be studied more. I think it's a pity that people aren't talking about her in colleges. I mean, we talk about Karl Marx and stuff.
Don't bring up colleges are like where ideas go to die.
Or I know,
but colleges have become that. Sorry if I interrupted you.
No, I believe that. Like that colleges aren't doing that. They're not giving that broad base, because even if you're a professor that disagrees with Ayn Rand, you ought to present the argument in the best fashion to say, hey, this is what this person thought. And then
this is why I disagree.
Let it blend in. This is what Karl Marx does. This is what Nietzsche thought.
Her deepest disagreement was not with Marx, by the way. Marx is just one of many modern philosophers that were at odds with her. And like her main disagreement was ultimately with Plato, as versus Aristotle. And then in the modern era, Immanuel Kant, she regarded as just the most evil destroyer of capacity to understand reality. And ask yourself why professors won't give her the time of day. Why won't the new atheist? Why won't Sam Harris even acknowledge her? Is he just that ignorant that he's just never had the exposure to her? I would think he knows who she is by now, or that he knows she's more than, like, she's written quite a lot. Why won't the religious conservatives talk to her? I mean, I've gone into great detail in that in some of my commentary videos, but and the reason in both cases is altruism. Because as much as these professors and these thinkers act like they're men of science, they have just been doing backflips and stretches in a way to avoid ever questioning the ethics that their mother taught them when they were a kid. Altruism. Because that's what really takes balls. It doesn't take any balls to be a communist in a world that accepts altruism as the moral ideal. It doesn't. I mean, even in conservative circles, you can argue for communism and be treated with more moral dignity than you can argue for what it is for Ayn Rand's philosophy. She ultimately is really, really triggering people because she's going where they're really not used to going. And she's the radical. She's the enlightened one. Like when you talked about how do we explain these things to people? They're so used to hearing the opposite, or they're so, they're almost hardwired against it at this point. Imagine explaining Enlightenment values to people in the Dark Ages. That's the way I look at it. I know it sounds like I'm crazy maybe, but that's just the way I see it. Like it ultimately just boils down to the basic fundamentals of philosophy, and the fact that Rand is so ruthlessly mocked and dismissed should really inspire you to look deeper into her, in my opinion.
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't. And I frankly, I hadn't read any of her books. Now I will.
I watched the movie.
If you haven't accomplished, if you think you haven't accomplished anything,
Well,
Rucka, you
yeah.
at the least have accomplished the fact that now I'm going to read
but that's
X
what
number of books because of
but
you.
that's what's so beautiful about what Rucka's doing is he has a platform, he has the ear of a generation, and he's using it. Again, he brings up the point. Let's not talk about what you don't believe, and let's talk about, let's get some good, whatever what are you building, and that's what he's doing. And I think, Rucka, you're slowly becoming kind of the point person for this. I mean, at least in our world, like I don't see anybody talking about it more than you. And you have some events coming up where you're going to be discussing this, correct?
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I heard you mention the movie. I don't know if you meant Atlas. I don't watch any movies based on Rand's work. Not even the one for the Fountainhead that she was involved. Like I just read. That's my honest advice. And also Leonard Peikoff's book that I gave Sargon. Yep. It's called The Ominous Parallels. It shook him up. I mean, trust me. I mean, you guys. I mean, Sargon. He's not an easy guy to break through to. I gave him this book. It's got a big. It's like a hat on the cover. There's a half swastika, half seal of the eagle of America, and it looks like an anti-American book, right? It looks like it's saying America is Nazi Germany, but it's the ominous parallels. It's saying we are going down a similar path as Germany was. And I gave that to him last summer, and he was shook up. He was in a trance when I spoke to him. I don't know if he would, necessarily say that was the case, but it clearly shook him up. And he was he's somewhat at a loss for words when I push him on these things, because again, these are not ideas that people are used to hearing. These are not questions people are typically needing to answer.
Can you do an example of Sargon, like imitation of him in a trance?
In a trance? Okay. You should do political videos. I can't. Yeah. Thank you for giving me that book. I honestly would not have read it otherwise. I would not have found it.
Oh,
so it is cool to to have the to be doing what I'm doing. It is interesting though. As much as I kind of do want to see the world change, I really don't expect it. And it really, me doing what I've been doing lately really is just about me saying what I want to say. So in a sense, it's very similar to what I've always done, which is this is what I want to create. This is what I want to kind of put out into the world, regardless of the reaction. I was expecting a lot of hostility. Like I was expecting that, the skeptic community or whatever would say, who is, fuck this guy. And many of them probably are behind my back, but, and a large number of people ignore me, which, that's just my life. But, I was expecting that just like anyone who's an atheist, I know you guys have your convention. I expected that any atheist is just like gonna just hate the name Rand. And I mean,
why? I mean that's not the thing.
You don't know how hated she is.
You don't know how hated we are.
Yeah.
So who are you guys? Like, I know you have this. I heard of you. Ironically enough, I heard of you because of your last convention where you booked Sargon and a couple of others, and that was controversial. Why do the SJWs want to be in your convention if this is who you guys are?
Why do they want?
They don't.
They don't.
They want to boot us out. They want to extract.
We have every single,
that
pretty much. We have every single atheist organization like knocking at our door and telling us we're Nazis and white supremacists.
That is such a loaded question. So,
sorry.
No. So the first thing is, so we had Sargon there so for 3 years. 3 years. It was a convention that was very focused on atheism.
Yeah,
should probably let Sean tackle this, but whatever.
Yeah, you probably should.
I'm already here.
You got it.
So it was very focused on atheism, and even more so if you want to take a more defined approach on mythicism, which is the fact that Jesus was a myth. He wasn't even a real guy. So then beyond that, we were like, all right, atheism's not being that hot. In the public sphere.
we started getting more into the entertainment realm. Like we worked with the Wu-Tang Clan, we worked with Eric Andre, Hannibal Buress, and Killer Priest, and like all these comedians and stuff. So we were like, you know, how do we blend the two? Because yeah, atheism is becoming more stale. It's not a hot topic. People just aren't interested.
It's not that people aren't interested. It's just
It's
it's like, oh, you're an atheist,
boring.
cool.
It's like, yeah, who
It's
wants to
not-
go to a
it's not
conference?
controversial anymore.
Atheists are talking about different things.
Well,
right
yeah,
now.
well, that too, but also, who wants to go to a conference and watch 10 fucking PowerPoints the whole time? I mean, Jesus Christ! So, like, we're always looking to innovate. We're always looking to partner with new people, and you know, Brian, is being a veteran in kind of the YouTube world, knows all these people, and you know, it really matched our goal with bringing in entertainers. So we decided to bring Armored, Shu, and Sargon to Mythcon 4, and Jesus Christ, everyone lost their fucking
Well, and
the
don't
shit.
forget
we're
the
called a Nazi training
Nazi
camp.
training camp.
Nazi training
Well,
camp.
and
Even though Sargon was going to be debating somebody.
The other thing to consider is we don't make a fucking dollar off this.
Yeah.
Like zero.
We would like to, Rucka. That's not
spend-
altruism.
I
That's,
spend gas
we want
money to
but-
get to the studio every week, and that's it. Like I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
get
yeah.
that back.
Yeah.
And so this convention is more. It was more for us. You know, we like debate. We like listening to you challenge ideas. We like listening to other people challenge ideas. So we were like, fuck it. If this is a true not-for-profit,
Yeah.
true like work of love, then why not, for our own fun, bring these people here and on stage and do something cool for people in the Midwest who I feel like get neglected because people move to the coast. Rucka. So
yeah, VidCon.
no, so we really wanted to do this, and we did, and now the convention is bigger, and we're getting shit from the
And it's about
SJWs.
ideas. We want to ask the hard questions.
Yeah.
We you know, like if you're going to like do edgy comedian, like all comedy is based on a certain amount of taboo and
Mhm.
challenging that. We want to challenge the status quo and ask the hard questions and have
Yeah.
people debate about it and make it as even as possible. We're not pushing one side or the other.
Yeah.
We're doing our best to make our conference balanced because again, universities aren't doing this.
Yeah.
That the debate at the university has ceased because you can't. So we are trying to do this. I
Yeah.
hope Kilroy is trying to do the same thing, and
Yeah.
I think Rucka is too. Like that, we want to make an ideas conference.
Well, and then the interesting thing, I guess the last point on this, the interesting thing for us, Rucka, is like going through this, you would think in the secular world, the atheist world, these are critical thinkers. These are people who like to think outside the box and ask the right questions. And we are getting like trolled by one of the, like, if not the largest organization and
Oh.
their president talking
Silver-
about how we're just trying to be
Right.
controversial and we're
The
about
American
hate
atheists-
and we're about all this. And it's like, wait a minute, Madeline Murray O'Hare in the 50s was like the most controversial fucking figure that there was in this
The
world. Like,
cantankerous lady.
and she did such a great job getting the conversation started, getting it in people's faces. And like, it's like we've forgotten the last 20, 30 years when atheists were kind of seen as taboo. We've gotten too comfortable in our own skin and saying, well, now it's normalized. We can't ask controversial or difficult questions anymore. It's like, it's really sad. So in a nutshell, that's what we're going through, Rucka.
Cool. And yeah, I mean, I hope you guys all understand that what you're doing is not altruistic, but the way I define it. Like the fact,
Not at all.
the fact you're not making a monetary profit has nothing to do with it. This is a clear passion, clear spiritual value that you guys look forward to. Like just so we're clear, I'm not sitting here going like, oh well, it's okay you're doing this, but it's not selfish enough. Fuck
Yeah,
that.
no.
Listen, I mean, we're all spending money to be at Kilroy, even if certain things are compensated.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We're gonna spend a few bucks here anyway.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, look, the whole thing with atheism. Look, God died centuries ago, right? Like the Dark Ages have ended. The scientific revolution, and the question always ought to have been, well, what's next? And I mean, the philosophers, they did spend their time answering those questions. And, you know, the Aristotle's sort of reintroduction to Western civilization gave us, in my opinion, the world we have around us. But yeah, I mean, the question is always, what's next? Look, I read a book when I was 14 called The Intelligent Person's Guide to Atheism. And it's a short one. And I think the guy's name, no, I don't remember the guy's name, but it was just like, just kind of plain simple. There's two ways to approach the world. There's the way where it was called a Baroque monarchy, where you presume the conclusion first, and then you look for evidence that supports it, and you discard evidence that negates it, contradicts it. And then the other way is called a Spartan meritocracy. And that is essentially the scientific method. You start by just looking at evidence and working your way up. And by that criteria, God does not exist. And, you know, it was a little longer than that, but that was the essence of it. And I said, there you go. And I had that kind of pink cloud where suddenly the world seemed like this new enormous playground, but the question of what's next is an important one. And ultimately,
you were really an atheist until you were 14?
No,
I thought you were an atheist way before then.
I was hostile towards religion. Like, I really didn't like it. I felt like I had been damned by religion, you know, like cursed by the commandments.
Well,
so
I mean, the Orthodox, you know,
Mhm.
Judaism perspective will do that. I get into this all the time with,
Sure.
because I participate in the Jewish community here.
Yeah.
I go to cultural events, or I just go to social events, and they're cultural, but there's like a religious undertone, and I make it very clear, like I'm not having anything to do with this, and they're still cool with it, because, but Jews, by the large part, I think, and this is interesting, is will accept you if you buy into the cultural, you know, the underpinnings, and that's awesome. Because I love the culture, and I'm gonna keep eating.
I'm sure that's
gefilte fish until I die.
I think you're lumping together very different communities, like the one from your little
they're
suburban.
Yeah,
that's not.
I don't know what it's
where
like.
I'm from.
I don't know what it's like in LA.
If you're in Jerusalem.
No, this is not an LA Detroit thing. I'm not from Detroit. I am from a bubble in Jerusalem. I'm from the fucking. I was raised by Navy SEALs. I was fucking. Like, I learned more by age 6 than most people about Judaism than most do. I was told very clearly, God is judging your thoughts, God is judging your actions, and if you fuck this up, you're going to hell. You know, and then I moved to the US, and everyone's walking around talking about how, Jews don't believe in hell. Listen, I was hardcore. But
when I heard that in your podcast, I was like, Rucka, what are you talking about? There is no hell in Judaism. That's
there
weird.
Absolutely.
That is just, I think that's, well, listen, there's a billion different sects. There's a billion different schools of thought. There's different eras of scholarly history. I don't know why you're insisting that what you've seen in, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan is
West Bloomfield.
I didn't want to dox you, so I said I
put my name out there. I don't care.
but Dima, you got to remember that.
But listen, but like the sort of pagan rebellion started at a very early age for me. I was 6 or 7 years old. I was really, really looking around me and saying, why do I have to do this? That's not fair. Like, why do the other kids get to have cool lives and I've got to do it? Well, because that's what God wants of you, and you're the one who knows it, so you have to do it. And when I was 12, so at this point I was living in the U.S. I was actually in the Southeast, and me and my buddies went on a Saturday, right, on Shabbat. We went into Shabbos. We went to McDonald's. We went to the ultimate.
With no money,
no-go zone. We had a few bucks.
No, you can't pick up money.
But we were starting to play by our own rules.
Oh my God, you're so rogue.
Oh, dude, we were going around. Me and my buddies, four of us, we walked into this strip mall over there. We had our white shirts on. We unbuttoned them and stashed them away in a tree, and we just had our white undershirts on underneath. Because what if the person working at McDonald's saw us wearing these white button-down shirts? They would know something's wrong.
Your talus was still sticking out of your pants.
No, we chucked those in the river long before that. But we went into McDonald's. I was amazed at how fast the food came. It was like literally fast food. I'm like, what? Like, I just paid you and I've already gotten my cheeseburger. We took the elevator up to like the upper level of the mall where nobody was. We sat in this dark little abandoned section of the mall, and we're eating our burgers, and it is the best thing I've ever tasted to this day. Like that.
Nice.
And it's a fucking dollar hamburger from McDonald's. Like the worst example of a burger you could think of. It was, to me, the greatest thing I'd ever tasted. So the rebellion, I was never religious from then on. Like, I never spent a moment observing any commandments or any laws that I could get away with violating. But as far as what my beliefs, what does God exist or not? I still kind of presumed, God, it probably is real. I started to look around. I started to ask these questions, started to read. And ultimately, I discovered the Intelligent Person's Guide to Atheism. I found it in the library. And that's, you know, the journey took me that way. But I mean, and it is important to ask, does God exist? Because if he does exist and wants us to do certain things and we're not following those commandments, then we're going to have a certain degree of guilt. And that's unearned guilt. And it shapes our psychology. It shapes how we look at ourselves. Have you noticed how a lot of Jewish people are very neurotic and feel very guilty all of the time?
Of course, it's a meme, Jewish guilt.
Of course, and part of that is that they're not. Many of them, they do believe in God, and they do believe that religious observance is proper, but they're at the same time not doing it. So that's guilty point number one. And guilty point number two is they are more altruistic than Mother Teresa on steroids in terms of what they believe. And at the same time, they're chasing that almighty dollar all fucking day and running every Fortune 500 company. So they're just feeling the ultimate contradiction. Everything that they enjoy, everything they do in life conflicts with what they believe is moral. So do you see why the morality of altruism creates this unearned guilt and drives people insane?
Yes, maybe.
And by the way, and that's why most Jews are far left. That's why most Jews are on the left, is because all they can do to alleviate the guilt is to say, all right, well, let's have fucking socialism so that so that we're less guilty.
I don't think that's the case, man. I'm gonna argue, and that's the last thing I'm gonna say on that is I'm gonna argue the point that the reason why they're doing it is self-preservation, is because our people have been so historically oppressed for fucking 2,000 years more. Is that's the only thing that a Jew can do in order for other people not to be like, that's a dirty Jew, he's making too much money, go take it away from him. Every society on earth outside of the United States has systematically kicked out Jews, taken their money. It's been a disgusting, evil act. And so they're preemptively trying to go, all right, hey, look at me. I'm giving so much to charity. I'm not a bad guy. It's a self-preservation tactic. I'm telling you, man.
Have you ever heard that conversation behind closed doors? Have you ever heard Jews saying, well, okay, we need to give this money away so they'll stop persecuting us? It's a matter of guilt. It's a matter of feeling that they owe this money to the poor. It's absolutely a moral code. It's an absolute sense of guilt that they have. And also, if they would think about it just a little bit further, they would realize the one country that hasn't horribly persecuted Jews is the capitalist United States, to the degree that it is capitalist. And the reason most countries have not behaved the same way is because they're anti-capitalist. The root of modern anti-Semitism, in my opinion, and Yaron Brook has an excellent lecture about this on YouTube called Anti-Semitism and Anti-Capitalism, is during the medieval times, Jews were bankers, and only Jews were allowed to be bankers because Christianity says don't charge interest, and Judaism says you can charge interest. So the Jews became hated because bankers were hated, because bankers are selfish, and because banking is an abstract profession. It involves thinking in abstract terms, and those are two things that people in a dark age really don't like. They don't like selfishness, blatant selfishness, and they don't like abstract thought. They don't like science and philosophy. So hatred of Jews, I think, is hatred of bankers, and a culture that embraces capitalism and embraces the financial industry finds themselves dealing with less anti-Semitism in my understanding of things. I hope I've given you a little bit something that, to chew on. You don't have to agree with me right away. I'm sounding like a Jew as I'm talking.
Yeah, but I mean, like,
Right.
what was Jesus doing? Overturning the money changers.
Giving fish.
No,
He was being an altruist. What's more altruistic than letting yourself be nailed to a cross for other people's sins? Jesus is, Peterson calls him the rock star of Western civilization. Sadly, he's become the symbol of the West, but that's not Western civilization began with the Greeks. But yeah, Jesus has become the symbol of what's moral and good in Western civilization. He was the ultimate altruist.
Great point.
By the way, about Peterson, sorry, just before I forget this point, I don't believe, even though Peterson himself has nothing but dismissive things to say about Ayn Rand, I don't think his type of psychology in terms of its practical application, existed very much before she came around.
Has he ever talked about her? I haven't heard a single.
He said she was not a great novelist. She was an even worse philosopher, and she occasionally made some good points. And she was anti-communist because she had good reason to be, because she came from the Soviet Union. There's a lot to get into with him, and there's plenty that I do like about him. I like the motivational stuff. I like the fact that his popularity is there's a spirit of self-improvement. I have very happy. That's the battle, by the way. The main battle that I'm fighting is not to get people to, to embrace Aristotle explicitly. It's to embrace, want to improve their own life, self-improvement, right? Self-help and all that shit.
Clean your room, motherfucker.
Clean your room. Now, before the 1960s, you went to a psychologist if you were crazy. You went to the nut house if you were. That's what psychology was before the 60s. There's good reason to think. In my understanding of things, this might trigger some people, but in my understanding of things, there is sufficient reason to think that before Ayn Rand and her psychologist student Nathaniel Branden and other people that were somewhat influenced by her writing in the 50s, there was not a whole lot of psychology applied to patients helping themselves and sound mind people looking for a way to improve their life. There was not, you didn't have people saying, I'm perfectly sane, but I really want to be happy. I want to go to a psychologist, to a therapist to find out how to feel better and to pursue success. There was not a whole lot of that happening. I think there is good reason to think that Ayn Rand, in large part, influenced the field of psychology to become more of a practical, self-help centered type of.
But we're in the 21st century. We got YouTube now. I mean, we don't. I don't want to discount psychologists, but frankly, we have thought leaders. I can go on YouTube and spend 17 hours, just sitting there and just listening to video after video of people who either challenge my viewpoints or will inculcate whatever I think. So, frankly, that is a self-help. If I'm feeling like, oh, society's out against me, I'm going to sit there, I'm going to listen to however many hours of Jordan Peterson talking about build yourself up, blah, 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 be a better person, clean your room, blah. And I'm going to be like, holy shit, I'm going to conquer the world. So there you go. That's a person he is a clinical psychologist, but I didn't pay to be in his session. I simply watched a video of him and all of a sudden now I feel a little better. So I think this free market, this YouTube, this free dispersion of ideas has helped innumerable people to get out of their little shitty bubble.
Dima even gets his counseling for free.
Listen, and that's what capitalism gives us. It makes everything more affordable and accessible. I mean, people could not have imagined the internet before it was around. People could not have imagined YouTube. I mean, that's what human freedom brings around. As much as people want to focus on the one homeless guy that didn't get to the hospital on time or whatever.
I'm gonna get you on that point, man. When I see you in Phoenix, we're gonna talk about healthcare.
I'm happy to talk about healthcare, even though that's not really a topic that I think much about. Like I'm living in the status quo just as you are. The question is, where are we going in the future? But
the only thing is, I'm just gonna give you the context because I was a big Bernie person, a year ago, and it was only because of healthcare and education, which I know are two things that you don't want to see. You want to see them privatized. So I have certain viewpoints where I still think that we have room to make those things be a public good, but I am so welcome for you to challenge them and break my whole philosophy on them, which is why I love your channel, man. I watch it and I go, challenge me, bitch.
That's the entire point of our org now in Mythcon is to challenge yourself. You will not be in an echo chamber there. Every person on stage will have somebody that disagrees with them, even the panel. So that's our value. Is
that's awesome.
Yourself by understanding.
That's great. And by the way, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of political arguments taking place on my channel. Like I'm not big on these concrete issues, on healthcare. And
I wish you were, dude. I mean,
maybe at some point, but my main thing is to challenge people on more basic levels. So when net neutrality came up, I saw PewDiePie making a pro net neutrality video. And then he took it down because he actually thought it was the government wanting more power. And then he took down the video and re-uploaded it with a correction saying, oh, no, it's actually the government giving up power, but we should still support net neutrality. And I sort of tied him into like some of the big business. Like I used PewDiePie as an example of how we treat successful people, how we treat businessmen. And in PewDiePie's case, he might not even see himself as big business, but he is. And he needs to see that. He can't just point at, you know, big ISPs and say, oh, fuck those guys. They're big business. They can't wait to screw us. And my whole thing was, PewDiePie, you're big business. Why should we give you the benefit of the doubt when the Wall Street Journal fucks with you, but we should just assume that these people are horrible people and not respect their property? I mean, there's a video where I got into the concrete politics because I saw it as relating. But yeah, I mean, it gets philosophical. When it comes to healthcare, you know, the argument can end up being more of like the logistics of how it would work. And like all I can say is, you know, your iPhone is look at your iPhone or your Android, and that's what Silicon Valley gave us. What did you want Silicon Valley working on in the medical field, making that more affordable, making it so that the average person can afford healthcare, as opposed to the highly regulated and unfree system that we have now?
I know, and Yaron makes this argument, and I know you're a big, and frankly, I started watching his videos because of you. So, which is fantastic. I don't, you know, healthcare is an inelastic good, and I think there's a case to be made there. And so I think it's a fascinating argument. I hope I put a bug in your brain in order to maybe, you know, look a little more into there and do some videos, because these, you know, you can talk abstractions, and which is fantastic, which is why I love, you know, watching your videos. But when you start talking about specific pragmatic arguments, that's when you can bring them into your water cooler presentation conversations. That's where I can bring that into my real life, and I can go, oh, this could work differently because Rucka thinks that, you know, whatever. So I'm not saying that you need to be a thought. I'm just saying, just think about these very practical applications of objectivist mentality and how they might, you know, go into your creative works, because that, as a selfishly, I would love to see that, and I think other people would too.
Mm-hmm. Well, hey, look, maybe that is where I'll end up, something I'll end up talking about. It's not really a topic that really gets me going, but also the fact that it's just why healthcare? Why not, you know, why not the food industry? Why, it's like, you know, people are so compartmentalized that, like, if I convince you that healthcare should be privatized, you might still want the FDA to control the food industry, and then I have to convince you that. I'm trying to get down to the basic principles. I'm trying to get back really down to the level of who does your life belong to, and I would say it belongs to yourself. By the way, you mentioned education. That is something I would privatize as soon as possible.
Yes,
because
I agree.
Because it's not. You're thinking, oh well, some people won't have it. People come out of school dumber than when they went in, and that's not a cliche. It's absolutely true. What the public school system does to students, the younger, the worse, by the way. It's not that college is this fucking slaughterhouse of people's minds. College is, you're lucky if you're still able to think by the time you get there. I'm thankful, like I told Ruben, I consider myself fortunate to have had my crazy cultish upbringing. If the alternative would have been to go to a public school in the U.S., where it's like the people you meet.
You and me are products of the public school system.
No, we're not. Well, I only went to public school beginning in 10th grade, and by senior year, I was passed out in the hallway, high on every pill that I could find. I'm not saying that's entirely the fault of the public school system. I'm saying they don't teach you to think. They don't teach you how to integrate. They don't teach you the importance of philosophy, because the teachers themselves don't believe in it. The teachers themselves went to the same shitty schools and they believe the same bullshit. I would like to see a private, competitive industry. I want to see the Steve Jobses of the world and the Elon Musks of the world. Instead of sending people into space and instead of inventing awesome gadgets, I want to see them figure out a way to effectively educate and to make it as affordable as possible. I don't know how we can continue to watch fucking the cell phones get lighter and smaller and and faster every year. But we think that if if schools are privatized, it'll go to shit and no one will be able to get in.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I mean, I always look at it from an operations standpoint. Competition drives innovation, which drives streamlining processes, which drives cost-effective processes. If there's been so many case studies. I mean, I'll just take like parking meters in Chicago. When the government was running the public, those meters, it was a shit show. All the meters are broken.
Yeah, but you don't necessarily need to park. The only reason why
I'm just taking that as a model, as the government running it from when a privatized company took it over. They innovated. You can use credit cards now. There's apps on your phone.
And that's why I got the fucking boot, right?
Yeah, well, that's all I'm saying is anytime you have competition, you drive innovation, you drive, making streamlined processes.
The question is access. We live in a Rucka. I've heard you say this. We live in the greatest generation ever. I totally agree. I don't want to go back to the Dark Ages. In the Dark Ages, you had peasants who fucking couldn't afford to go to school, so they worked on a farm.
Why is that? Why were they in the Dark Ages? Is because the government didn't nationalize the education system? Is that what their problem was? Or is it that they were religious fanatics? You guys are supposed to be these big atheists, and you worshiping the state. You think only the government can provide us with education? That's what was wrong with the Dark Ages, because they didn't have public schools. If only they had West Bloomfield High School down the street, they would have gone to those schools, and they would have learned that their mind is ineffective and that the world around them is only an illusion compared to the world that comes after death, because that's what people believed back then. They didn't believe in science. They didn't believe in reason. And this is the most important battle, honestly. If I was into politics, education would be any step towards privatizing education, from vouchers to any way to get us there. This is where the actual battle takes place. I think the fact that you have such a hard time agreeing with me on some of these things might be a product of the education system, because even the fact that you agree with me at least on principle, but then when you actually want to apply it, you think the two are unrelated.
I come back to equality of opportunity, and I go, listen, I had awesome, at least one Jewish parent who was pushing education, who said you have to be better than every other kid because he grew up in the Soviet Union, and Jews are second-class citizens, so you have to be better than the Americans because they'll always look at you as a Jew, which was never the case, but that really had an impact on me and my brother. So, in this case, I go, all right, well, what is the underprivileged, whatever, the black or the, whoever didn't come from that kind of upbringing, if they don't have access to something that's paid for by the state, are their parents going to go out of their way to pay for schooling to get them there? And if they're not, do they fend for themselves? Okay, fine. But what if they're on the street? What if they mug me later because they're, it's a whole cyclical. It's such a fucking giant ecosystem that you have to think about.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I'm just saying it's a whole thing. And if the state takes care of one thing.
Oh, yes. These inner city schools where you need a gun to defend yourself. That's by the way, the reason there are no all these high school shootings never take place in the inner city, probably for a number of reasons. I would say that's a whole can of worms, an interesting one. But one of the reasons there's never any mass shootings in the inner city is because everyone there has a gun. But not the point right now. But yeah, public schools are a shit show. The public schools in those inner cities, in those Latino communities that you're so concerned with, they're the ones getting screwed the hardest by all of this. They're the ones who need competition.
I think this is the misunderstanding. Is you think that I'm some sort of altruist looking at this. I'm looking at it purely from a selfish standpoint. I'm going, listen, we did the bare minimum to say equality of opportunity. Here you go. Make the best of yourself. And if they fuck their own life, totally up to them. But if you don't do that, they may have some sort of argument about the fact that they didn't have the chance to do so. And so crime, and so this, and so revolution. I'm always going to come back to this whole, the lower classes will rise up and fuck us all in the ass. And so, I know you kind of skipped away from that, but I'm very, very concerned about that. In even the most utopian objective society, I think that the masses will rise up unless we give them their tiny little handout. And that's where I think the two things of education and healthcare really come into play.
Well,
That's the basis of my argument every time.
You can take the Marxist out of Russia, but apparently you can't get Marx out of it. Listen, I can't continue to argue this basically mystical belief you have that the poor will always want to riot and rise up when we're living in a country with certain degree of poverty, and they haven't done that. And
because we give them stuff. We give them stuff.
Listen, the more free we were, the more of a work ethic people had in the past. And in a freer, more prosperous society, the poor would be able to provide for themselves, which is what people want. Yep. But listen, I agree that you don't care about the poor black kids. I agree that, no, I'm joking. But look.
Someone's going to take that shit out of context.
No, I mean, no one's going to do that. But yeah.
Already of me.
Listen, look, again, this is why I don't like arguing politics, because now it's like we need to get down to the basics of philosophy. I do believe. Listen, by the way, the inner city, the blacks, and everyone, they need philosophy too. I do believe, and you may say I'm now sounding a little crazy. I do believe that in the future, in the far future, if Ayn Rand's ideas ever are embraced by the world, immigrants would assimilate like they really used to in a long time ago. Immigrants would assimilate, and I think the American Negro would assimilate as well. He would not think of himself as part of the race. And I think he might, in the future, look at Ayn Rand the way he might look at Abraham Lincoln. Because what she frees us from as individuals is a stronger grip than metal chains could ever hope to grip.
Well, we think Anne is a pretty cool chick. So.
Rucka, thank you so much, man.
It's Ian, by the way. Sorry to interrupt.
Ian.
Watching your videos, I got to ask most, if not every question that I had, listening.
It's the longest show we've ever done.
This is the longest show we've done. But like sitting in my chair, I was like, fuck, why doesn't it talk about this? And I got to get everything off my chest, which is unbelievable. So thank you so much. Brian, I totally monopolized this shit, but I was listening to, it resonated with me so much because I think we're like 99% in agreement. But then I wanted to give you some shit over the things that I thought were problematic, and I got to do that.
That's what we do. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. Yeah.
Rucka, thanks again, man.
So we appreciate it.
Thanks again for coming on. If we could just keep you on for a second, we're gonna end the show. But
yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I've got a new commentary video actually called. The working title is "We're a Social Species," which actually addresses some of the things you brought up early on about ancient times or whatever, prehistory and
us in the
genetic side of
Oh, and Rucka, what else do you have coming up? I know you have Kilroy. We covered that, but I'm
actually getting ready to fly to London later this month. I'm going to be there the 19th of March for about a week. I'm going to be doing some talks and panels. I've got some things planned. I can't quite announce yet, but hopefully I'll be getting together with some old familiar faces and having some fun. And who knows, I might even make my way over to Wales and visit my favorite McDonald's. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but there was a Welsh McDonald's that was in the news for playing one of my songs without my explicit permission. And guess who got blamed for it, if not myself? So I might have to go claim my free burger now that you know what McDonald's means to me. I might have to go get the second best tasting one.
Is that the second best tasting one then?
Oh, we'll see. We'll find out.
What you need to do too is also update the Sargon song. Get a new Sargon song about King's College and Antifa.
I mean, it's amazing. Like just to think, if you think your actions don't matter, I gave this guy a book. 6 months later, he's having a monumentous moment with Antifa, talking to a guy he would not have heard of if not for
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, you said he knows the most. He is Ayn Rand's like Ayn Rand's like
Ayn Rand.
Everyone told me Ann, and
it's Ayn.
Just remember the
terrible
Y.
American.
Ayn Rand.
Wait, are you saying Yaron Brook like knows the most about her or her philosophy? Because that's not the case, by the way.
Rand. We're just gonna say Rand.
Mm-hmm.
I think you missed what he was. Are you saying?
No, you're saying that he's an objectivist, though. You're the guy Sargon was debating. I'm missing.
Yeah. He is, and he's a very prominent one. But like philosophically, he is not like the he is not like the kind of go-to philosopher. Like he is not the I think, in my opinion, he does a very good job concretizing this philosophy and making it understandable and accessible. But there are some hardcore philosophers sort of above him that that would do a better job going up against the the thinkers of our time.
I thought it was you, but it was someone else. Okay.
Well, you did say that he's very like he's entertaining. He's
he's the charismatic one. So he is the one I would send out to kind of speak to the public. But like if I had to maybe if I had to have like someone debate Richard Dawkins or something on philosophical merit alone, like there are probably others I would send much sooner than Uran. But if the goal is to win over the audience, then Uran is probably who I would send up into any debate because of, again, charisma.
So Rucka, September 22nd, if you want to come back to the bosom of the Midwest, that's Mythcon 5, baby.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. And yes, thank you everyone for joining us. Let's cut it off. We're over 2 hours already. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Mundane Matt next week, so check that out. Same time, Wednesday,
Absolutely.
7 o'clock. Rucka, thanks for joining us for this long, man.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally.